what if I told you everything we thought we knew about transformers was, well, a little over-normalized? For years, we've been spoon-fed the idea that normalization layers, things like LayerNorm and RMS norm, are the unsung heroes of deep learning. They stabilize training, smooth out activations, and keep those gradients from going rogue. But hold on to your GPUs, because this new paper is about to flip that assumption on its head. Meet Dynamic Tangent, a ridiculously simple replacement for normalization that mimics LayerNorm's behavior, using nothing but a tangent function and a learnable scaling factor. No activation statistics, no extra computation, just pure, elegant squashing of extreme values, and it works! Now let's dive in.
Normalization layers have been a core part of modern neural networks for quite a while. They stabilize training, speed up convergence, and often boost performance. But what if we don't really need them at all? That question is the driving force here. To understand why this might be possible, think about what normalization layers do. They transform input values in a way that strongly resembles the tangent function, which has that classic S-shaped curve. The authors propose a simpler alternative called Dynamic Tanh. Instead of computing and applying statistics like mean and standard deviation, Dynamic Tanh just uses a learnable, scaled tangent operation. It adapts on the fly, but doesn't carry the overhead of traditional normalization. Surprisingly, using Dynamic Tanh instead of normalization doesn't seem to hurt performance. In many cases, it actually keeps pace, or does even better, without exhaustive hyperparameter tuning. So why stick to normalization layers if we can get similar or even superior results with less fuss? The rest of the paper digs into how Dynamic Tanh works and tests it across a variety of tasks, from vision transformers to large language models, LLMs, to see if it really holds up. When we train deep models, the activations can fluctuate wildly. That's the main reason normalization layers were introduced. They keep everything in check by adjusting values based on statistics like mean and variance. Different normalization types abound. Batch normalization, or batch norm, was a game changer, especially for convolutional networks. But transformers often rely on layer normalization, LayerNorm or LN, which operates on each token independently rather than across a mini-batch. It's perfect for sequences. A more efficient variant called RMS norm goes one step further. Removing the mean centering part of LN models like Llama, use RMS norm to reduce overhead. Enter Dynamic Tanh. The key insight is that LayerNorm typically shapes activations into an S-curve, not unlike tangent. So instead of a formal normalization step, why not just apply a dynamic tangent? That's exactly what Dynamic Tanh does. It replaces LN with a simple element-wise scaling and tangent transformation, making things faster while preserving performance. Look at figure 1 here. You'll see a standard transformer block applying LayerNorm, then passing its outputs forward. The Dynamic Tanh version drops normalization and uses a scaled tangent instead. This shift could eliminate the time spent computing statistics. It challenges the belief that LN is mandatory. If Dynamic Tanh yields similar results, why stick to LN? How exactly does LayerNorm end up acting like a tangent function? The paper first visualizes what goes on inside 3 different transformer models, one for images, one for speech, and one for diffusion. Then, in figure 2, you can see how selected LN layers map their inputs to their outputs. Early in the model, LN looks almost linear, scaling the inputs proportionally, but deeper layers tell a different story, bending into an S shape that looks suspiciously like tangent. Figure 3 drives this home by comparing LN's transformation to various tangent curves. The fits are quite close, which suggests LN in deeper layers is doing more than just scaling. That's the spark for Dynamic Tanh. If LN effectively becomes a tangent-like squashing function, why not simplify the architecture by directly applying a scaled tangent transformation? This reduces complexity while capturing the essence of LN's behavior. Dynamic Tanh follows that logic and appears to match LN's benefits with fewer moving parts. You might think LN just scales per token values, but zoom out and you'll see something more nuanced. Look at figure 4. On the left, the activations of individual tokens end up forming straight lines in their respective channels, exactly as you'd expect from LN, yet when you consider all tokens together, the overall effect becomes an S-curve. LN is squashing large values toward the center. On the right, the figure digs deeper by examining channel-specific activations. Some channels, like those in red or green, have broader input ranges, producing more extreme values that get compressed the most. LN effectively keeps these large activations under control. In essence, LN isn't just standardizing features. It's also providing a built-in nonlinearity that prevents extreme values from overtaking the learning process. And that's exactly what a tangent function does. So it's no surprise that a tangent-based approach like Dynamic Tanh can stand in for LN. So how does Dynamic Tanh actually work in place of LN? The core idea is remarkably simple. LN's transformations resemble a tangent curve, so let's just do that directly. Dynamic Tanh applies a tangent, scaled by a learnable parameter, to each element. Another learnable parameter shifts the output, so the model can adapt to different activation ranges. In practice, the authors propose 3 parameters that handle scaling before tangent, scaling after, and shifting. No batch statistics are computed, and no complicated steps are needed. It's an easy drop-in replacement for LN because you only change the normalization call to Dynamic Tanh. The rest of the model stays the same. Check out algorithm 1 to see how short the PyTorch implementation is. It's literally a module that wraps a scaled tangent call. The big question, of course, is whether Dynamic Tanh holds up in real-world tasks when you remove LN entirely. The following sections tackle that question. Does this simple replacement actually work? The paper answers that by experimenting on a variety of tasks. First, look at Figure 5. The training loss curves for Dynamic Tanh versus LN are almost indistinguishable. If you only had the loss plot, you wouldn't guess which model used which method. Now check out Table 1. It reports ImageNet 1K classification results for vision transformers, or VITE, and ConvNext. Dynamic Tanh's accuracy is right on par with LN, or even a tick higher in some spots. Then Table 2 explores self-supervised learning with MAE and Dino. Again, Dynamic Tanh matches LN, suggesting the approach works even where the model trains without labels. Finally, look at the generative scenario in Table 3, scores. This table measures FID scores for diffusion transformers. Dynamic Tanh slightly outperforms LN in most cases, especially for smaller models. It suggests Dynamic Tanh might stabilize these generative models more effectively, leading to better outputs. So across classification, self-supervised learning, and image generation, Dynamic Tanh keeps up with or surpasses LN. The next question is whether it scales to even bigger models. Scaling up is critical. Can Dynamic Tanh handle huge language models or specialized tasks like speech recognition or DNA classification? The paper shows promising results. Look at Figure 6 for Llama's pre-training loss curves. Dynamic Tanh's curves are nearly identical to RMS norms, showing no disruption in training dynamics. Table 4 backs this up with similar losses and zero-shot accuracies. Dynamic Tanh basically mirrors RMS norms' performance across multiple model sizes. It doesn't stop at text. Table 5 tests Wave 2 VEC 2.0 models on LibreSpeech for speech tasks. Dynamic Tanh matches LN in the base model and does slightly better in the large one. Then Table 6 shifts to DNA sequence modeling, and Dynamic Tanh performs on par with LN, so whether it's human language, audio data, or genomic sequences, Dynamic Tanh delivers results comparable to standard normalization. This suggests Dynamic Tanh isn't just a niche trick for vision models. It's broad enough for many transformer-based tasks, large or small. What about speed? One benefit of dropping normalization is that Dynamic Tanh might run faster. Check out Table 7. The authors see over a 50% reduction in per-layer inference time and about an 8% reduction in total training time for big models like Llama. That's substantial for large-scale training. They also test whether the tangent is truly necessary. Table 8 compares Dynamic Tanh to versions without tangent or with other nonlinearities. Getting rid of tangent entirely leads to training failure. Hard tangents and sigmoid are functional but yield slightly worse performance. Tanh is the sweet spot. Finally, Table 9 looks at the learnable scaling parameter alpha. Removing it causes an across-the-board performance drop. So alpha is crucial to help Dynamic Tanh adapt to each layer's input distribution. Takeaway is that Dynamic Tanh isn't just a random function swap. It's an optimized design that saves time, depends on tangent for stability, and uses alpha for flexibility. By now, it's clear Dynamic Tanh can train models without normalization. But how exactly does it maintain stability? Two big points come up here. First, Figure 8 shows that alpha, the learnable scale in Dynamic Tanh, tracks the inverse of each layer's activation variance. It adjusts on the fly to keep the model's outputs in a stable range. This is what keeps the training from collapsing without explicit normalizations. Second, how does Dynamic Tanh fare against other normalization-free methods like fixup, skipinit, or sigma reparam? Table 10 answers that. Fixup and skipinit rely on careful initialization, but struggle to match Dynamic Tan's performance in deep transformers. Sigma Reparam, which rescales weights, is more competitive, but still falls slightly behind Dynamic Tan. So Dynamic Tan stands out as both simpler and more effective. Let's zero in on alpha, that learnable scale factor in Dynamic Tan. Does it always work smoothly? For most models, yes. Figure 9 suggests that Dynamic Tan remains stable across a wide range of alpha values, from 0.5 to around 1.2, except in supervised VL, where an alpha above 0.6 can cause training instability. Figure 10 shows what happens when alpha gets too large in bigger models. Training becomes unstable unless you lower the learning rate. On the flip side, choosing a smaller alpha promotes stability and can make Dynamic Tan act almost like LN in terms of reliability. So for large supervised VIT models, you might have to tune alpha carefully or reduce the learning rate. In short, Dynamic Tan is generally robust, but certain large-scale or sensitive tasks demand a bit more attention to alpha. Dropping it too high can break training, but setting it moderately low makes Dynamic Tan as dependable as LN. Now, how should alpha be set when training big LLMs like Llama? The paper compares different strategies based on model size and layer type. Table 11 shows two important trends. 1. Larger models need smaller alpha values for stability. 2. Attention blocks actually benefit from a slightly higher alpha, while FFN layers and final projection layers do better with lower alpha. Figure 11 provides a nice visual. It maps out how the pre-training loss responds to different alpha values in attention layers versus FFN layers for Llama 7B and 13B. Higher alpha values in attention blocks reduce loss more effectively, while FFN layers need to stay smaller for stability. Another key insight is that width, i.e., hidden dimension, matters more than depth in deciding alpha. So if you're dealing with a wide LLM, you might want to keep alpha low overall, but crank it up a bit for attention blocks. Following these guidelines ensures you strike the right balance and keep training on track. Finally, we get to some related work and potential limitations of Dynamic Tan. Table 12 confirms that wider models generally require smaller alpha values. Depth isn't nearly as critical for tuning alpha. In the broader research landscape, normalization layers have been explored extensively, often linked to controlling gradient flow or smoothing the loss surface. Transformers rely heavily on LN, but it turns out LN itself is quite nonlinear and might influence representation learning more than we initially thought. There are also methods to train networks without normalization at all. Techniques like fix-up and skip-init focus on initial parameter adjustments, while some researchers propose gradually removing LN from already pre-trained models. Dynamic Tan fits into this trend but goes a step further by offering a direct, tangent-based alternative that seems to maintain or enhance performance in transformers. However, Dynamic Tan isn't a universal plugin everywhere. Early tests show it struggles to replace BatchNorm in ResNet-type convolutional models. So while Dynamic Tan might be a powerful replacement for LayerNorm in transformers and similar architectures, it's not guaranteed to solve normalization for every model out there. Further work is needed to understand how Dynamic Tan interacts with other layers and architectures. And that's it for today's deep dive. Thanks for joining us. Happy exploring!